when we're talking trucking cases, let's start with like the evidence. You know, how do you approach like the investigation, preserving the evidence, and just kind of those challenges that go into the case as compared to just maybe your in the
You're
you know
saying if
an auto.
you're saying if I'm an auto wreck lawyer and
Mhm.
a truck wreck comes in, what do I do?
Yeah,
I mean, that's
yeah,
the
yeah. That's the question. Simplified.
yeah.
Yeah,
And look, depending on, let's not pretend that all trucking cases are homogeneous, right? So let's answer this two ways. Let's say there's some cases where my hope is you would look at it and say this is a catastrophic multi-gazillion dollar case in the right hands. If there's coverage, if there's all these other things, if everything lines up, this is one I probably ought not do on my own. And I don't say that lightly. I'm not saying call me, but there's lots of great lawyers out there. I do think we should know where our limitations are. And if you're going to do that, then you don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish and wait too long to make that decision, because people who know this area and who have the resources to spend, they're going to start spending a lot of money and utilizing resources right away to start to secure the evidence and at a very sophisticated level. Okay, but let's say it's a case that you may be holding on to in house, and you're not going to go and employ somebody else. Then I think that the key things in these cases, the first thing that's most important to do is get a spoliation letter out or a preservation of evidence letter out. You go to my lawyer portal. If you can download one from there. The idea is to put everybody on notice, the trucking company or companies on notice, to preserve everything that can be preserved, so that if they start playing games with the evidence, you at least have a letter saying, I put you on notice not to destroy anything, and you did it anyway. And in many states, that gives rise to various kinds of sanctions, right? Either a presumption or something along those lines. It also very quickly sends a message to the other side that you're not just the average bearer. You kind of know what you're looking at. If because if the letter is a sophisticated letter telling them to preserve things that are and you're making reference to the federal regulations and you're making reference to these kind of things, you're sending a message. Make sense?
hmm
So then beyond that, you really want to have a plan. And actually, we have a couple of checklists on our portal for this purpose of things that you want to do. So you send the spoliation letter out, and then you do start the investigative process, because you got to understand that the trucking companies, by default, they get notification of the wreck from the truck itself. Even if the driver doesn't call in, they know their truck's been in a wreck. And if it's a significant wreck where there's serious injuries, that starts a very well-oiled machine at that point, because they're in the asset preservation business at that point, right? And it's
Right.
not necessarily about discovering the truth. It's about discovering how can they best protect themselves. So you have
Well,
to counter that with your own plan that involves dealing with the vehicles, the scene, and witnesses, um, and preserving and getting that evidence quickly. That's the biggest thing that needs to be done right away. And then, of course, we could break that down and say, in what ways and what things are you after and looking for? And these days, there's so much technology that's out there that it's a different world than it was when I started practicing law 30 years ago. I had a
right.
case, just to tell you this real quickly, I had a case very recently, a year ago, where a gentleman was hit in a crosswalk at 5 o'clock in the morning by a truck, run over, left for dead. Basically, the truck drives off, and three law firms turn the case down because they can't figure out who the trucking company is and what happens. They just get a call saying this guy has catastrophic injuries, and all the sophisticated everything in the world. We couldn't even really get any of that stuff started. We got that case done by literally going old school. We went down to the area, we drove the area, we found a business that looked like it had a camera that might be pointing in that general direction. It was about a third of a mile away from where it happened, but we figured, well, maybe it picked up. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. There shouldn't be that much truck traffic. We begged, borrowed, and pled, got the video, and sure enough, there were only two trucks that went by. I sat there with another one of my guys, and we literally hunted through logos of trucking companies and found the closest match that we could. We had with the help of some law enforcement people, that contacted the trucking company, confirmed that there had been a truck in that general area. This is now a week after the incident. Um, we got them to stop that truck. Law enforcement 6 or 7 states away went and met with that truck driver and found blood splatter on the wheel well. Um, so
Unreal.
so that case went from being one that could not be brought to one that was, obviously they paid everything they had at the, multi-million dollar, 20 something million dollar result, only because that's what the coverage was. But that's old school, and sometimes that's what it takes. It takes a tenacity to just go after what you need to go after.
That's incredible, and it sounds like you're countering a different level of speed. You said quickly, but they get notified immediately if it's a certain amount of collision, right? The truck
Right.
automatically gets notified before you may even get the case or the call. So, what is speed of? Is speed their main defense mechanism? Like, hey, let's get out in front of this. Let's, like what are some of the what's the common defense for a trucking case? They know they're at fault. They're, what's the common thing that you run up against that they try to use for defense? Because these are so large that they've got the processes and playbook of here's how to limit our damages.
Yeah, I mean, look, they use all of those. They're very sophisticated, and it depends on the circumstances. It depends on the lawyer. It depends on the company. Some companies, the way they do it, what I think is the right way. They know they've got a problem. They try to reach out to the family early, and they try to come in and do something that, quote, is the right thing to try to take care of the family members. Um, you can say they're doing that altruistically, or you can say they're doing that to save money. And depending on who it is, I tell you what my thought is on it. But then there are the companies that do start to play games. They'll start to divest themselves of the truck gets fixed very quickly. The truck is moved from the scene, even though the company knows that it has telematics, that it has a black box. The way the black boxes on trucks work is there's something called the last stop record. So when the truck stops, it takes the system takes a snapshot over, depending on what make, model, year the truck is. But let's just say for the last minute or so, or 2 minutes, or whatever, depending again on the truck manufacturer, it takes a snapshot of what the speeds were, what the braking was, and other information about the truck, and it's just a snapshot. But as soon as that truck starts to move and gets to, again, depending on who the company is, let's say by 5 miles an hour, moves 5 miles an hour, that last stop record disappears. It can never be retrieved. And then when it stops again, a new stop record happens. Okay. So imagine the gamesmanship that might be played, even with somebody coming to the scene and telling an unsophisticated police officer, hey, would you like for me to move the truck off of the roadway here over onto the side? Okay, as soon as it moves, the last stop record's gone. And the police officer thinks, police officers are trained, and I'm a former police officer. We're trained. We're not experts in trucks, and we're trained to clear the roadway as quickly as we can. So yes, thank you for sending somebody who can move this vehicle off of here. So that's the way it works. And so there's all kinds of gamesmanship. But these days, I mean, there's a very, very sophisticated plaintiffs bar. I've personally been on one of the leading forces of training people around the country on how to do these cases. I knew early on that if I truly wanted to affect highway safety, I wasn't going to be able to do it alone. There's just not enough of me to do that. So I needed to build an army of lawyers who knew how to handle these cases and who could bring the industry to a point where they could change their belief from safety is something we have to do because we're required to comply with rules, to safety is truly good business. And we have to do that, unfortunately, one case at a time. But we've made a difference, and I'm joined by a lot of other people who are warriors in that movement.